Thank you to our sponsor for today's episode, East Brother Beer. Located on Canal Boulevard in Point Richmond, East Brother Beer mixes classic brewing styles with precision and modern sensibility to create the perfect Bay Area craft beer. Before we get started, just a reminder that you can find all of my available rental properties on my website at marcguzman.com. If you own investment property, click on the Owner Services section to see our complete list of services. In the 2 years that I've been doing this podcast, I've had the joy of learning firsthand of the wine and craft beer revolution that has swept the Bay Area over the last few years. None of our guests truly represented this movement quite like Noel Diaz. We last had Noel Diaz on episode 17 to discuss the making of organic wines, and in the process learned how Noel turned a small group of wine lovers into a large collective of wine growers in Richmond, of which his company is called Purity Wines. Noel returns today to talk about how his business has grown in the last year and a half and many more exciting things happening at Purity Wines. Noel.
Where am I?
You're in Pinole now. Different change of office here.
Yeah. Wow, your podcast is really doing well. I gotta start subscribing.
Yeah, podcast business. We're growing. We're up to 600 units right now, taking over a few HOAs, commercial buildings, San Jose. We might be buying a couple commercial management companies. So,
oh my! Well, we should just talk about you. I think. Have you had a pod with just you talking about your business yet?
Actually, we kind of do. I started another one called Money Managers. So basically, I interview other asset managers, other wealth management experts, and we just talk business.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, you're busy too.
Yeah, pretty much. But it's fun. I mean, I heard someone talking today. In fact, I was listening to one of the audiobooks by John Taffer, the guy who created Bar Rescue.
Oh.
Have you seen that TV show?
No. Oh, is that where they go in and they're having issues and then they just
and they scream at all the bar owners and then flip it around and help them out. So he has an audiobook where it's called something about get rid of your bullshit excuses, something like that. And he goes into talking about like really good advice. But one of the things that I heard this morning is, well, you could be working for someone, but it's also nice to work for yourself. And even if you make less money, nothing beats working for yourself, doing your own thing, and just really being happy with what you love to do.
Yeah, it is definitely. In looking at, I tell my kids, I've got 2 kids now. They're 10 and 12, and they're starting to ask more questions about like why I do what I do and having a business. And I told them one of the reasons that I did that was, one, hoping for the flexibility to be there whenever I choose to be there, to see them grow up and go through things. You know, if you have a job and you are working for somebody else, it's hard to say, you know, I need Friday off or I need Monday off and then just decide you can take it. With my own job, I can just do whatever I want. The other hand is showing them how I'm constantly scrambling and I'm working 24/7. It's
That's a good way to put it. It really is 24/7.
It is. But I don't even look at it like that because I love what I do. I have a real deep passion for it. So it's kind of like I'm interested anyway. I want to be either reading about it or planning something or putting out a fire or initiating another kind of level of the business. But on the other hand, if you're not careful, you can also kind of get yourself. The other day I had to kind of calm down. I'm going through some stresses because we're coming up into harvest. Making wine, everything's coming in now, and it started about 2 weeks ago. And I started getting myself kind of tightly wound and getting ready for this because there's 10 of us at this. Basically, it's a co-op in Richmond. There's 10 of us, and I want to make sure that everybody's happy. I'm the leaseholder. I'm the point person. On the one hand, I'm collecting rent, but on the other hand, anytime somebody gives me $1, they really want something for that. And I was, at some point leading up into harvest, I was just in my head trying to cover all of these potentials for mistakes or just making sure everybody's happy. And we got through a quarter of our production. We'll do about 100 tons this year, and we've already gotten 25 in, and it's working. I see now like a pathway. And if you come to the winery, you'll see it's stacked and packed. there's very little room to move around. So there's a lot of Tetrisy. There's a lot of like that puzzle where you got to get that one little block into the other side of the square or something. And that's very much what this is. And at one point I stopped and I said, it's working. I'm just trying to hold it all together, but actually we got through a quarter of this and we haven't had any catastrophes. And I could feel in my body this that endorphin thing. Like, when you get tightly wound, you gotta, sometimes you think about the chemistry in your body and what you're kicking off and how you're dealing with the stresses. But at this moment, I said, this is a success. This is a win. So let's do the happy juice. And I did that. And I truly felt like, I love what this is in spite of how stressful. But if you're not careful with your own business, it definitely is one of those things where it can get away from you. You're constantly struggling to answer those questions and put out those fires.
Yeah, for sure. So let's get into some of the wine that you brought here. I see 2 reds, 1 white, and the white, it looks like, what is it? I'll let you explain it.
It's a Verdelho, which is a Portuguese grape. This comes from Lodi. I work organically as a winemaker. I'm a natural winemaker, which means that, as of 2017, I'm not adding sulfite. But more to the point, what's important is that I'm not adding things and I'm not pushing a wine to become something against some kind of an ideal. So I'm not saying I need my wine to taste like this wine or that wine. Rather, I'm bringing in fruit and I'm processing it and letting it be itself. Very much like what I talk about my kids. They'll ask me, what do you want me to be when I grow up? And I said, happy is what I want you to be, and I want you to define how you're going to get there. So that's really what we need to talk about. So when I get fruit in, it's like, if there's nothing obviously problematic with it, then I don't really need to do much. If I start to see something that's, let's say the wine's turning into vinegar, then I got to ask myself why that's happening. Or if yeast are sticking and they're not fermenting all the sugars, I got to kind of get in there and do that. And I also don't, as a natural winemaker, I'm not filtering, and so my wines can be cloudy. But I think that also gives it more texture, more flavors,
More character.
Yeah, people talk about refinement in wine, and I don't know why whatever is not refined isn't necessarily good. I mean, there's an implication that when the wine is refined, it's better. I don't find that to be the case for myself.
Well, I think there's a big change in the wine demographics or the wine trends where you have a lot of people now starting to really look and consider natural wines, organic wines, because they're realizing when they start doing some research that a lot of the big wines that people tend to enjoy are made with a lot of additives and things that should not be in wine. In fact, this was what we were talking about. So for the listeners and viewers, go back to episode 17 to catch the first episode. But I remember there you were talking about the various things you do not do with the wine that other winemakers do. In fact, because other winemakers, and you could explain this better, will add certain things to the fermentation process in order to control and limit how much damage is caused to the wine, correct?
Yeah, they're looking at consistency and predictability. So I don't add yeast and I don't add enzymes. On my labels on the back, I tell the story of how the wine was made and what, if anything, was added to the wine. I don't do that because I feel like I don't want necessarily consistency. I think I may have said this last time on 17. That one of the good things about the wines that I make is that they tend to have personalities. One of the bad things about the wines that I make is that when you find a wine of mine, let's say a Barbera, that has been really popular, you might come back to me and say, I had that Barbera and it was really good. I really liked it. Do you have more of that, or do you have something like it? I will generally say, I may have more, but it's going to be a little bit different. Or I may try to lead somebody in a direction to experiment and be able to go, hey, these wines can be different. Give them a second, adjust to what's there, instead of just having something that you go to the store and you're like, I know what that wine is. I'm going to get it because it's going to taste the same year over year over year. And that's fine for people who like those kinds of things. I like the idea of not pushing something into being something that it really doesn't want to be. But you can by adding. You can add wood chips. You can add coloring. You can add. There's a chemical called Velcorin, which is actually deadly, but it's got a half-life. And so you can run that through wine and you can get rid of all of the bacteria so that you don't have some kind of a rogue ferment of some kind. But I don't like to put any of that stuff in. And I think that one of the things that I've kind of advocated for is for like an ingredients list. Why doesn't wine have an ingredients list? What is it that people are afraid of when you have to write down that I added in mega purple, or I added in tannin, or I added in acid? Why is that such a negative? If you're willing to do it and you're willing to put yourself out there, why wouldn't you be proud of what you're assembling your wine with?
So hence the name Purity Wines, why you named the winery Purity Wines.
Yeah, and also somebody asked me once about, somebody was asking me, and he said, purity, what's that supposed to mean? And I said, well, it's the goal. It's I don't know how perfect or pure something can be, but that's when I get up every day, it's like, how can I get closer and closer to this? You know, you talked about like more people are embracing organic. And there was a push about 15 years ago for organic wines, but those organic wines were made conventionally. And all that qualifies for an organic wine to be organic is there's two things. It needs to be certified organic. Now, my wines I don't require that they be certified. I can get into qualifying that in a second.
Well, there's a lot of flaws in that and ways, like loopholes, in order to get certified organic.
There can be. You're right. There can be exceptions, and you petition for an approval to the exception. So even if you go and research exactly why something is organic, it's not so easy and so simple to find out why or how something became. If you look at it as like a simple web search, you'll find that organic just means that everything has to be carbon based, whatever is added, whatever is used, which can cover a lot of ground. But when you're making wine in a conventional way, you're moving it around and you're exposing it to air, and that's one of the reasons people would buy organic wines and they would seem tired or they'd seem cooked, because they didn't have any preservative in the form of sulfite, but they were made as though you were going to use sulfite. I don't move things around. I make the wine with the intention of not adding sulfite. So my wines have a freshness to them, but they can be murky because I'm not moving them from barrel to barrel to clarify them.
You've had a few wines that taste so much like fruit, like it's fresh fruit coming out of the barrel.
Yeah, I try to keep those primary. I try to keep as much. Those are esters basically, and they're volatile. And the more you shake a wine around, the more susceptible it is to kind of blowing those off or losing them. I have one wine that I think maybe you might also be talking about, which kind of smells like really intense violets or like lilac. It's got this real intense fruit quality to it. And I do like to have that kind of a freshness and that relationship. Even now I'm moving into possibly making some cider, and I was talking to the grower about conditioning apples and how I want to retain that when you stick your nose in the glass. I remember going into a restaurant some years ago that had a little anteroom, and in that anteroom they had apples just stocked up. And I was just blown away by how intense. And I'd never realized how really aromatic apples were. And this is like 10, 15 years ago. And I've always remembered that. And every time I thought, okay, someday I'd like to make something like that. And so in making wine, yeah, that was totally the intention. The wine, go ahead.
So with this white wine here, how do you find a Portuguese grape in Lodi?
There's a lot of Portuguese growers.
Really?
Yeah, they settled there. They settled in the Central Valley, in the Sacramento kind of area. And like this guy, his name is Ron. He was raised here, but he has this relationship, this familial kind of thing. And when he grew grapes, he wanted to grow like an homage to what he had in Portugal. He's Portuguese, and he would say, my parents used to make wine from some of these grapes, and that was why he wanted to plant them. So it was a connection for him, and he thought I'd like to see people make wines. And and I don't see I think it's fun. I mean, I didn't ask for Verdelho because it's like, okay, people maybe don't recognize what it is, but he said you should take some. It's really good. You're gonna make a really nice wine out of it, and I think I did. This one has it's got that kind of cloudiness from it. It's a 2018. And it tastes a little bit like kind of like pear skin and apples, and it's got a little spice that tastes a bit like radish, or reminds me a bit of radish.
It's really good. The one thing I love about your winery is that you've introduced me to probably 2 or 3 different grape varieties that I never even knew existed.
Yeah, I like to play. People will ask me, "What do you want to do as a winemaker? What do you want to make? Do you want to make these kind of like Syrah or these kind of these Rhone, these French, Southern French varieties?" And my answer is always, I just want to find good growers. And what I tend to find is a lot of times what other people don't want. But if I find at least that the grower is doing something that I like, I mean, it's got to be minimal organic, but I like it when I'm finding these mom and pop operations where these, it's a couple just living on the vineyard, and they're tending to it because of their love to their connection. Those are the people that turn me on, that I want to come back and say, I do the same thing. I work by hand. I'm not playing with these or manipulating these wines. And so I can end up with something like Verdelho or Touriga. Barbera is more common, but I also make a Mourvèdre that people might not be so familiar with. This year
that was one of the ones that you introduced me to, and I love that wine.
Thank you. Yeah, I like them because it's just like, I used to drink. I've been drinking wine all my life, so I've been drinking wine since I was probably like 18. I got putting myself through school. I worked in restaurants, and I was fascinated. I love food and wine, so I would read up and do as much tasting as I could. And I like things that are different. I remember there was a period in my life where I was tasting very similar wine, drinking very similar wines. Those kind of like point-driven wine, 95-point wine, 99-point wine. And I wanted to taste them because I wanted to know, what does that mean? What does 100 points mean? Well,
it means they spend a lot of money on the advertising.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly
for a big chunk of those.
Yeah, that's exactly. There is a lot of marketing, and I found that what I was getting was homogeneity. I was getting wines that were starting to taste the same, and I couldn't tell the difference between different varieties, different grapes, whether it was Cabernet Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Pinot Noir. They were all kind of tasting the same because they were going for a certain profile. What I was gravitating towards were the ones that were kind of unique and different and fun and funky, and that's like, I'll tell people will taste my wines and they'll be like, "Wow, I'm surprised that they're not so weird." And it's like, well, I don't set out to make a weird wine. It's not that I haven't. I have a wine that I made that I became really successful with, although it was a small amount, and I called it Pickleback. And it tastes like a pickleback. It's got these sour notes, but I know that I'm making small enough amounts that I'll find an audience. I have one that was something from last season, made from a white grape. I have something this season that kind of tastes similar, made from a red grape. And what I like about what I do is I put it in a bottle. I'll just let it sit there until I'm happy with it. Strangely, I'll have people come through the bar, we have to talk about the bar in a minute, through the bar or through the winery, and I'll be having conversations. They'll be like, "Really? Can I taste it? Because it sounds like maybe kombucha, or it sounds like sour beer." And I'll be like, "Yeah, it's got a little bit of that going on." And they'll walk out with a bottle with it because they liked it. And I talk to friends of mine, and I'll be like, "What am I supposed to do? Do I want to drink it? Maybe a glass. Do I want a bottle? Maybe not. But if somebody else wants a bottle and they want to drink it all, who am I to judge? Just as long as for me it's just everything being upfront, just clarity of what's happening." That's kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I think everyone needs to try to explore other different grape varieties. I mean, just try a whole bunch of different wines, because people tend to stick with Merlot, the Cab, the Chardonnay, the basics, right?
Safe wines.
The safe wines. The problem with that is, like you said, they eventually just blend together at some point, right? Unless you're really tasting certain unique high-end wines. But for most people, they're tasting 10, 15, 20, maybe upwards of $30 bottles, and that's kind of like the price range where I think the majority of the people really focus on. But they stay with those safe wines. I think once you start to venture out into different grape varieties, that's where you start to even appreciate those safe wines even more.
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, the way that I've always wanted to work, the way that I've always wanted to sell my wine is so that they're accessible, so that you can come in and you can get a bottle of mine. Generally, my wines sell on the retail side for about high teens to the low 20s. And I know that that's not cheap. by most people's standards. I think that you can find a bottle of wine. Also, if you come to the winery, I have a much more generous price point. And I do that because I want people to feel like they can experiment. And I always tell people, if you don't like something, bring it back or tell me, and I'll give you some kind of a credit, because I want people to have fun and experiment, because I think you're going to find, I like it when somebody that I would never have thought likes a certain kind of wine, and yet they would be like, well, I usually like these wines, but I really like that wine. And it's just like anything. People will come to the winery or the wine bar, and they'll be, I don't know anything about wine. And I'll say, yeah, you don't need to know anything about wine. You just need to know what you like. And I'll say, I bet if I had a conversation with you about pizza, we could spend 30 minutes on you telling me what makes a really good pizza. And it's the same thing with wine. These are foods, and they're really meant to be enjoyed.
Well, let's talk about the bar real quick, because last time when you were on the episode, you had no bar. It was literally the winery that was a collective of about, if I remember correctly, 5 different winemakers together, and there was no bar. It was, you walk in, and I remember you had giant crates of just grapes. You have barrels everywhere. But now it's a little bit different, because now you actually you walk in and you've got the seating area and you actually have a bar there.
We do. So even now, and this is really what I tell people, I have a space. So we're in kind of an industrial, a warehouse space in Marina Bay, and it's just a block off, very close to Rosie the Riveter. We moved in there because it was 4 or 5 of us, depending on when you came and visited and had a conversation with us. And we went in there purely as a co-op. We were going to be, it was very utopian. We were going to share in all the expenses, and we were all bootstrapped. And as I'd be doing work in there, and so it's a big office, it's a big warehouse space with an office that was cut out of the front. And even when we moved in, we were talking to the management company, the landlord, and we were saying, hey, can we not make that an office? Can we keep it open? Because we really need to run a forklift around, and we really need to stack things, and just for ease of use and not running into walls. And their response was, we've already gotten permitted with the city, so we already kind of have to move ahead, because all these units are going to look basically the same. And so we said, okay. And their concession was that they just cut a big doorway so that we could push a forklift through there. As we were working on that first year, which was 2017, the locals would come up and ask when we were going to open. And I looked at them like they were speaking in a foreign language. And I finally understood that they wanted to buy a bottle of wine or a glass of wine. They wanted to get something to drink. And so then I went to the management company. I said, can I open a bar? They said, go ahead. They liked the idea because there's not really much going on in that neighborhood. And then I went to the city, and they were all for it. So there's been a lot of support from the neighborhood. I come from the restaurant industry. That's where I grew up in. So I know how to put something like this together. So we've cut out this 1,500 square foot area in the front of the winery. We have the winery in the back, and we opened up a wine bar. And I'm still kind of getting that up and running. I never really had any money for it. I didn't have any capital set aside because it wasn't part of the business model. The business model was, this is how I'm going to get a winery to be successful. And that whole co-op kind of morphed. It didn't work for some people. It worked for others. I've got there were 4 of us to begin with. Two of those people moved on, but now I have 8 other people that came in, and I switched up the
8
whole.
8 other people.
Yeah, there's 10 of us there now making wine. We're going to do probably about 6,000 cases. I'll do about 1,500 cases this year. There's another guy. He'll make about 2,000 cases, a little bit bigger than me. And we're all still going. We're all still, these are young businesses that are still kind of catching momentum, but we're relatively well connected in this kind of natural wine world. So we're doing well. We're having good successes. Now, success and making money, those are 2 different things. I'm successful in what I'm doing. 5 years in, I started 2013. 5 years in, I'm kind of starting to see the potential that I could do this and make a living at it. But it's been touch and go. And you're kind of,
Well, I've heard the same thing across the board from a lot of beer makers and winemakers, that you really don't see profits sometimes for 5, even 8 to 10 years out.
There's a lot. We're moving on to the next wine here, which is a Syrah from Calaveras County. This is I'm going to make sure I get this right, 2016, which was the first year I started farming this vineyard. Yes, there's a lot of lead time in starting, especially the wine business, because there's different ways you can make it. And it took me a while to learn, but I can actually now make wine and have it ready for market in probably 9 months. And that took me a while. Generally, you kind of think of about a lead time of about 2 years from when you get the fruit to when you're ready to get it out. In the natural world, we're more kind of easygoing in terms of how long, and we're looking for freshness. We want this immediacy. We want something that's bright in color, that has this fuchsia or has this green apple color that just becomes appetizing to the eye and interesting and so there's a little more, but that took me a while to figure that out and how to do that. And you have to balance what the market wants with what you want. There's a certain I like these wines and I want to make a rainbow. I'm making Amaro. That's another thing that I'm making too now, which is a way for me to use some wine that say spoils. I can distill it and I can create an Amaro. As long as it's my fruit, I don't have to have a special license. I can distill it and use that to make something that has a little higher proof alcohol. But yeah, and so it's a puzzle. Constantly,
so are you working on that already?
I'm working on it already. Yeah, I've got a preliminary blend for Amaro. We're just kind of fine tuning it now. It'll be about 25 cases. I'm going to put them in 500 milliliter bottles as opposed to 750 milliliter bottles. I'm going to charge about the same price because there is a bit of loss. If I'm taking a barrel that's 132 gallons and I'm distilling it down to 7 gallons of high proof spirit, that then I'm going to move into a 50, and this gets kind of complicated, but you can visualize it, is that I've got some loss, and to mitigate that loss, because I have a richer product in the form of an Amaro, I can effectively charge a little bit more, but mostly really I'm giving a little bit less so that I can stretch it out longer, so that I can rationalize how I'm moving my resources around. So yeah, I'm in it, and it smells beautiful. I talk to people like, if you think about a really good looking older gentleman, and it's the way he smells to me. It's got this sandalwood. It's got this kind of this. It's got a little bit of fennel, a little bit of cedar, a little bit of bay. Just somebody that you want to have a conversation with, and that is what I'm putting in that glass. Is what I'm hoping to. We'll see. I mean, you play around with this, and that's part of having this facility, this place now. I'm not just collecting rent from 9 other people. I'm creating a community. That's what's really important. I'm not just taking everybody in there to pay the rent. It's more like, okay, where are you? What are you doing? What are your goals? And let's see if we're in alignment, because I want there to be harmony. And that's what I'm finding is happening this year. And yeah, so we've got the wine bar in front. I got it. It is a wine bar. So I don't just sell, it's not a tasting room. I don't just sell purity wine. I'm obligated to actually buy and sell wine from other producers, and I do have some of those things going on. Initially, I wanted to introduce myself to people, so really I'm working on the purity wine, but not as a long-term business model. As a long-term business model, I want to be a really cool natural wine bar with this. We've got a living room vibe. My wife...
I was just going to mention the living room furniture, because it's very relaxing, very chill there. But my favorite piece, which actually I have not sat in the living room furniture the many times I've been there, but that one table you have, that one large table, I'm in love with that table. Fits like 12 people.
It's huge.
What's it made out of?
Okay, so we got it's got this this table it takes 3 people to lift this table. I got it into place with a forklift, and it's probably got I'm not sure what's underneath it, but I've looked, and it looks like plywood, about 3 inches of that, and then it's ringed with this kind of wrought iron, this kind of gothic looking piece of iron that is just runs the lip of it, and then on the inside it was supposed to be at least I was told it was zinc, but I had issues with it. Part of it starting to rust because we have wine. We're in an acidic environment. Anything that can potentially rust will rust. And so this zinc, I think, was an electroplate kind of zinc as opposed to a zinc melt. I've had to do all this research. So the table can come apart. We're gonna take the top off. We're gonna take that zinc off, and I'm gonna put copper in there. Because I think it's more food safe, food friendly.
Mm-hmm.
For that's what it is, and it's just this big kind of gothic piece of furniture. We found everything on Nextdoor. My wife Everything was just piecemeal. Okay, we got a sofa. It's $150. It's leather. Let's go look at it. If we like it, we'll take it. There's another couch that we found that's got this kind of, blue material that's comfortable to sit on. So we wanted the whole thing. The whole idea was, I want people to come in and I want you to feel like I'm invited you into my home. And I know hospitality. I know how to take care of people. So when you come in, the first thing I do usually is give you a little taste of something just to kind of get things going. Buys you a little time to sit down and acclimatize yourself to the space. People are I remember when I was filling out the paperwork, the health department at one point said, well, where's your bar? And I said, I don't want a bar. I don't have a bar. A bar separates me from somebody else, and I don't want that. When people come in, I want them to feel like they're friends and family.
Well, that's the one thing that when Kim and I have gone there, we've interacted with so many other people. It's not.
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
Yeah, and we've met other people to where it's not one of those bars where you sit down with the other person and you're just chatting together and enjoying the bar. It's one of those where you go there and you can still chat with each other, enjoy it, but because of the way it's set up, you tend to interact with so many other people and meet some very interesting characters.
Yeah, totally. I can't say I did that. I can't say I did that with the forethought. Honestly, I don't like going to restaurants. I'm always slightly put off by the communal table at restaurants. But I have to say, I've had fun at those spaces, and you deal with it. And there's a really cool restaurant in Sacramento called The Kitchen, and you all sit around this big, it's just a big bar that goes around the kitchen, and the chef there chats with you and talks to you, and he involves you in what he's doing. And you can be to yourself, and you don't have to interact, but you end up kind of talking to your neighbors. And I didn't realize, but that's kind of what I did here in Richmond, is that it's just there, and I go and talk to people because I don't want to waste. I don't want to be just taking. I don't want to serve you. I want to interact with you. I want to share with you. I want us to kind of, life is limited. I want us to enjoy each other's company. And that's the way I set it up. And you're right. I've seen people exchanging email addresses and setting up we should come back again together. And I like that because we are part of this community.
And it's funny because you do have a few tables where couples can sit by themselves. And the funny thing is, all the times I've been there, no one's ever sitting. Yeah. Those seats and tables are empty because everyone naturally is gravitated toward the living room or this large table where you just literally meet and talk with everyone else.
That's so cool that you bring that up. You're right. It's those little deuces, those little two tops. They tend to people. I think it's also because of the way that we're greeting people. We're not, and I have somebody who's helping me now. His name is Jacques. Really great guy. Doesn't know a lot about. He's a good food and wine person. Doesn't know much about natural wine. But that wasn't so important to me. What was important to me is that he cares about people. And you're right. When people come in, I told them, just say hi. Hi. Make yourself at home. I'll be right with you. Go get them something to taste, something to sip on, and let's get things started. And you're right. It's kind of it's lubricant, this social lubricant. I'm slow. I've just got a sign. And I had just got some sandwich boards, and the ferry's coming in there in the marina, and I'm starting to market slowly. But again, because I didn't have a budget for this, it's kind of like I tell the neighbors, I tell the locals, look, I can shut it down if this isn't gonna be worthwhile, and this isn't something that the neighborhood wants. I'll close the doors and I'll just be winery again. That's okay too. I want people to come in and enjoy this. It's got to work. I don't know that I have the resources to really market it like maybe somebody who's more sophisticated could. But I'm trying and I'm there. I'm showing up. When I first started, it was weird. When I first started, I didn't have Jacques. It was just me. And I had a friend of mine who's in the business, and he laughed.
You were running around everywhere.
My friend he laughed at me. I told him, he said, well, who's going to run the bar? And I said, well, I am. And he just laughed. He didn't say anything. He didn't say anything like, you're ridiculous. That's absurd. He just chuckled. And I was kind of like, what's that supposed to mean? And he's like, nothing. Good luck. And so then the schedule would be all over the place. Like when I would be open and something would happen with one of my kids, and because I post on Instagram. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm at _wine bar. That's a great way to follow me to find out little updates. And then I got one of my kids is getting me on Facebook. So those things I'm starting to get the kids ready to kind of take over, hopefully. It takes time. But yeah, it's just like I would open and then I would not open, and I would blast out on Instagram like, if you're gonna come in, call me, let me know, give me a heads up. Otherwise, my son's got this band concert that I really want to go to. I got such flack from a couple of people, and I felt so bad. And they were disappointed that I wasn't open. But now that we got Jacques, we got regular hours. Should I say the hours here?
Sure.
How about this? How about we do something simple?
Or
open
just
right now.
follow you on Instagram, and then
Yeah.
you'll post the regular hours.
And I'll post the regular hours. Thursday through Sunday, though, right now. But, yeah, so I really love what's going on. I had Harold McGee. If you know Harold McGee rolled in the other day. He wrote a book called On Food and Cooking. He's a hero of a lot of people who dig. Like I'm talking like he's in that kind of Shape and East realm. I mean, he knows these are. He came into my bar and I was so humbled because I was like, here's this cool guy who found it because one of the neighbors brought him who was a friend of his. It kind of ended up in this kind of organic fashion and I've got some really interesting people. And then just like you said, like when the locals come in. I've had people who are becoming regulars, and it's like, "Hi, Diana, how are you doing?" I think you might have even met Diana, or Tanita. It's like, "Hey, Tanita," and Tanita came. I love this. Tanita came in. It was her grandmother's birthday. She came in. Her grandmother passed away like 10 years ago, and she just wanted to kind of come in and hang out and say hi, and we gave a little toast to her grandma, and that was so cool. It was just like. It's very from like family like there, and that's what I want to continue with. And we put on a couple of comedy shows. I got some people who actually are really cool comics.
You've done 2 or 3 comedy shows now.
Two comedy shows.
I was at the first one, and that was hilarious. That was a lot of fun.
That was, oh my God! I wanted to apologize to everybody. It was standing room only. We had 100 people in the winery. We had people standing in the back. The comics were milling around all over. People could meet them, chat with them.
I tried to buy tickets for the seats at the wine barrel, but got there too late.
Oh yeah. Oh I'm trying to kind of like deal with a lot of these things so that people can kind of get things.
But it's a good sign you had people in the back standing because that means way more people bought tickets, and there's definitely a demand. And to be honest, he really didn't care. It was awesome to see all the different comics up on the stage you guys created, and it was a great night.
Thanks. It was cool. And these are comics who play like legit comedy, and it just so happened a friend of a friend said, "Hey, would you be interested in putting on a comedy show or like just like a comedy night?" And I was like, "It depends. If it's professionally done, let's do it." And it was, and I was in over my head. I was just trying to keep up with the amount of business, and then the second time we did it, it was much more successful in terms of making sure everybody got a little bite to eat and some wine, and we're gonna do another one in October.
Yeah, I think one of the cool things about that comedy night was the fact that after the show was over, anyone could have stayed afterwards. Comics, some of them hung out afterwards.
They did.
And they were really fun to talk to.
Yeah. I want no pretension. I want people, and it's important for me that everybody goes in there, be treated like like I said, be treated like their friend. I want everybody leaving feeling really, really good about that space. To me, I look at it, of course I got to make money at some point. Of course, I have my dreams. There's a car that I have in mind in the future, and one of these days I'm going to have that car. But on the other hand,
what is that car?
It's not super crazy. It's a Porsche Boxster. It's under $100,000.
Oh, those are nice.
I can get that.
Dude, that's the same one I want.
I love that car. My wife and I used to rent before we had kids. We'd rent them, and a couple $100 a day, and we'd go up into Napa and hit the turns. I used to ride a motorcycle. That's the closest feeling to riding a motorcycle that I've ever come to. Now that I got kids, I can't ride a motorcycle anymore. But I was like, I got that. I found one used, and I asked my wife because I needed a car because mine was 200,000 miles and was ready to break down. And I said, "Can I get this?" And she's like, "What about the kids?" And I was like, "Okay, I guess not." Later, but I love my kids. I love my wife. It's all good. But someday. But
have you seen the new Boxsters?
They're beautiful. Oh man. No, I could talk to you.
They're pricey. They're what, $100,000 now?
They're like if you get them all souped up, they're like $130. But you can get. I would be okay getting one, used one in really good shape for reachable amount of money. You know, I don't know, 50,000 is still a lot of money. But anyway, so about like, it's to me, I don't do the bar. I'm not there trying to make my fortune. I'm there trying to have a way of life and a path. And I want my kids to see that. And I want them to grow up. When I was growing up, I remember my mother always saying, oh, you know, your dad and I, we were going to start a business. We just never got around to it. We always got busy. You know, they had 5 kids though. And I always remember, it's like, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you start a business? They worked in vineyards all their life. You know, they were migrant workers for much of their lives. And so I could see them in a sense, my mother's dream of someday starting a business. So one of the reasons, like, it's this whole kind of 3-level thing. It's for my kids, it's for me, it's for my, in a way, it's an homage to my family. But I feel like I like having the wine bar is like, really, I look at it as a community service. Like, I want to be there for people to come and have something that they didn't have before that.
Well, if you go to a lot of other countries, and this is something that I noticed a lot in Portugal and Italy, that many of the neighborhoods have one or two go-to wine bars, wineries, and it's all family oriented. It's local community oriented, and it's not like many wine bars out here where you sit down, you're given a menu, and it's like a machine, right? And it's a machine for them to make money, make a profit, right? And not to say you don't want to make money or profit. I mean, we're all doing this, part of the reason why is to make money, but it's a completely different style. It's so relaxed, so laid back in other countries, and they're so focused on the community, the local neighborhood. And that's the same feel that I get from your wine bar.
Yeah, I grew up in the Central Valley of California. I grew up in farming town. I grew up in Delano, California, which was in the 60s. It was part of the whole like labor movement, and it was about organizing and getting better treatment for farm workers, for the migrant workers. And I dealt with a lot of that coming up. As soon as I was 18, I bounced to the city. I just had to go. And I love farming and I love agriculture. I don't want to live in that stuff. What's happening ecologically, environmentally, this whole thing about climate change, it's really important to me. And I sometimes I'll have conversations with people and I'll be like, okay, you know, plastic's everywhere, but really how bad is it for the environment? Like, you know, like I was talking to somebody about like a weed whacker. I'm like, you know, we go out to the vineyard and we take our weed whacker and then pretty soon you're empty and you need to re-spool the line. I'm like, where's all that plastic go? And you start to kind of, but getting back to exactly what you're saying is like thinking about the community. Like for me, I moved into the city. I fell in love with the city. I'm an urban winemaker. I love being here. I'm always about the underdog. I moved into Richmond. I didn't know what it was. I mean, you know, I knew it was socioeconomically diverse, and there's some difficult areas too. But then I started to see the life in Richmond, and it's incredible. It's amazing. And
I think Richmond's been one of those cities that's been yearning for businesses to come in. For I don't know how to say this, but they've been wanting some new life coming in, new businesses, something fresh, something different that Richmond's never had before. And I think Richmond's starting to get that. You see a lot of winemakers, beer makers, restaurants opening up. I don't know if that one restaurant's open yet. There's a restaurant where
Salute used to be, or that's gonna reopen pretty soon. We're over in the marina.
But it's not gonna be Salute, right?
No, it's not gonna be Salute anymore. It's gonna be, I forget the name, but it's gonna be, it's the people who have a hotel. No, it's something called Hotel something in Richmond.
I was reading. Oh, Hotel Mac.
Yeah, those people, I believe this is, you know, a lot of this is like community. It's like people talk to, you know, I have neighbors come in and they have so much information. And they'll come in and say, oh, yeah, they're working on it. There was a lot of work that needed to be done, but they're fixing it.
Yeah, there's like even some high-end restaurant that's opening up in Richmond, some private, only 20 diners per night.
That was where Harold McGee was going that night, that he came over to my wine bar. They were headed up, and it's kind of like, it's not.
Is that open yet?
I think it's, okay, so I've been trying to figure out what it is, but it's a bit, it's not, I was told it's a pop-up, but it's not a pop-up. It's in a place that's like a catering space that then they outfit to become like a restaurant. And it's supposed to be like, it's a prefix menu. It's like a fixed dinner.
Yep.
And I guess you work with the chef to decide what you want. And it's supposed to be really, really cool and really, really good. I would love to, like, whoever that is, I want to find out who that is and maybe do some like mashups or something.
I'll
I
have
think
to,
that'd be cool.
yeah, there was an article about the person, I want to say in the West County Times. I'll have to look it up and then I'll send it to you.
That'd be great. Yeah, I'd love that. I'm all about like, yeah, doing stuff like that is making it more interesting because, you know, Berkeley and Oakland, they're crazy expensive. And out here, it's still a little bit because you can get into these, I don't know if you want to talk about gentrification, but you can get into these areas that are kind of changing now. And, you know, there's a lot of
people here in West Contra Costa County that they want wine bars. They want craft beer makers. They want nice, fancy restaurants. The problem is there's really not much out here, and you have to drive to Oakland, to the city, sometimes San Jose. You have to drive out to all these far-out places in order to get that. And so it's nice to see that Richmond is having a big influx of those type of businesses.
I think it's the same thing that happened in New York, for example, where you move out like Brooklyn, like people don't necessarily, and it's Brooklyn, and then there's some of these, I forget all the neighborhoods, but there's these sub-neighborhoods where there's some cool things happening. I'd love to see Richmond. I have a 5-year lease with an option for a 5. My option for the 5 is at market rate. I know what's going to happen when I'm done with my first 5. They're going to come at me and they're going to hit me really hard with a raise because they're going to be looking at what the potential is for the future and what's going on in Berkeley and what's going on in Oakland. But I want to be able to develop a business that's strong enough to be able to sustain that. I would like to be there indefinitely. I think it's beautiful. I think what's happening, the diversity and the growth is amazing. And I want to be a part of that. It's exciting.
Okay, so we got to get into, we're about to taste this third wine here, and this is the Syrah?
Okay, this is a Syrah. So we didn't talk about the middle one, and the middle one I call Earth and Cherry, and it's a Syrah from Calaveras County, which is a vineyard that I farmed for about 3 years. I've left it, I didn't farm it this year, I actually handed it off to a friend of mine, but it's organic, I didn't till the soil. In 2020, last year I didn't even spray sulfur, which sulfur in a vineyard not spraying is basically unheard of. You're just courting disaster with mildew, which ends up turning into rot. This is a 2016. I like the way it was. I thought it was soft, it's supple, it's earthy, it's got these kind of blueberry, boysenberry notes to it. It's really elegant. I find it delicate. I think it'd be really good with food. We're moving into, so that Calaveras County is Southern Sierra foothills, which is about an hour north of Yosemite. And it's very diverse geologically. There's mostly quartz, but there's granite schist, and then there's a lot of clay in there as well. But the next one that we're tasting now is a Syrah from 2015, and though it's a year older, I feel like it's built for much, much, much more age. It's dense and it's dark fruited, almost has this kind of licoricey, bay, herby thing.
It definitely is darker than the last one.
And that's from Nevada County, where it's grown on granite. And this site that I've been working with them for 4 years now, and I hope to work with them indefinitely. There's two winemakers that source fruit from their vineyard. I share it with another Sacramento winemaker, and the wines that I make from that are always really special. They're unique. I mean, I think all my wines are worthwhile. I don't put something in bottle if I don't think it's worthwhile. I'll distill it and make a Amaro.
That's phenomenal.
Thank you.
It just smells and tastes amazing.
Makes me want a steak.
Yeah. Yeah, it does, right? Yeah. You know what? I bet you this tastes even better once you start chomping into a ribeye, huh?
Yep. When you do that. Also, what's really good, because I'm not beating wines up to make them be something, a lot of times, and I'll have people tell me, I had your wine, and the second day it was even better. That to me says it's got life in it. I had a wine of mine 2 days ago. It was a 2015 Pinot Gris from the Sierra foothills, and it was just getting to that point where it was perfect. And it was good before, but all of a sudden I thought, oh my God, this is like a really, really good wine.
And you drank that one over a 2-day period?
Actually, funny you should say that. I actually drank almost the whole bottle that night that I opened it because I liked it, and I left about about 2 inches at the bottom of the bottle. And I have Layla, I have an intern working with me this year helping me out. And I've been trying to expose her to things. And I had left this bottle on the counter, open, 2 inches of wine in it. This was today, so it was night before last that we drank it. I poured her a glass and I said, taste it, smell it. What do you think? And she said, I think it still smells good. There is some evolution in there, but it's not tired. It's not dead. It was still really good. That says to me that there is so much energy in these wines because I'm not taking these lives out of them by moving them and manipulating them.
Now, do you think more traditional winemakers should learn the natural process or the process of natural winemaking in order to better improve their own wines?
This is interesting because what you're saying to me, one of the things that sometimes people will say to me, all right, so I sell some of my wine at Whole Foods. I sell the Barbera at Whole Foods. They're actually selling out of it. I think we were successful at selling there. But I remember talking to the buyer once and she said, well, I got to be careful with putting natural wine on. Like if I had a natural section on the shelves there, she said kind of like, well, what does that say about the other? If you're natural, what are the other ones? And
Fake.
I've had well, there I guess unnatural is the implication, but I don't agree with that. I'm just saying, hey, I'm willing to tell you what's in my wine. Why aren't they willing to tell you what's in their wine? Why don't you ask? Sustainable, organic, those are not the same. A sustainable business is a business that can work. And maybe there are things that you do for a sustainable business that are really noble. Sustainable farming is not organic farming. Organic farming, that's what everything should be. Sustainable, they're still using chemicals. But yeah, I've had people say to me, well, you go around, you're selling your wine, you're telling everybody it's natural. Well, what does that say? Like you're telling people you're superior. I've had people say, do you think that there's a potential to be perceived as being arrogant? I'm not arrogant. I'm not going around telling you not to drink everybody else's plonk, junk, whatever. I mean, trash, whatever. I'm not doing that. I'm not saying that they're that. I'm saying this is what I am. They can say whatever they are. If you want to somehow read into what I'm saying and say, well, therefore you're being arrogant because you're purity and you're saying that you're natural and everybody else isn't. Do I think that people could learn? Do I think that there is something to industrialization and how we're losing sense of maybe some values? Do you want to talk about working in a cubby all day long, where you don't talk to people and you don't move and you don't stretch your legs? I get on a plane ride and it's 6 hours long and I have to get up and walk around and I feel like I've deprived myself of something. But that's part of modernity, right? Yeah, I mean, I'm even learning more about farming in terms of you can farm with a system that's in balance. So there's competition, natural competition. If you have something like a pest that comes in, it's only going to do so much until it completely kills its environment and then it will die. Or if it figures it out, it'll work in balance so that there's competition. We lose that when we just decide to throw chemicals. I used to say, all right, look, I want to work organically because philosophically it's what I like. But no doubt industrialization fed a lot of people. Now I just read something where now we're looking at long-term effects of industrialization and how getting the soils to have life in them, we're losing, I think it's phosphate that I was reading. Phosphate is an important nutrient for agriculture. If we can't mine phosphate, what are we going to do then? Now what are we going to be left with? You fix something with one fix, it isn't always the complete fix. You look at a system and you create a balance. I think I answered your question. I tend to wander, but what I'm saying is that, yeah, I think it's time to step back a little bit and ask what our values are. I don't have a problem.
I think the idea of just listing an ingredient list on the back of a wine bottle would be kind of, it seems like a no-brainer if we have to do that on every other piece of food item, right?
That's right. When I go to the market and I find a package of something that looks interesting and I haven't seen it before, the first thing I do is look in the back and see what's in it. And then I determine for myself, if I want to put that in my body. I had a friend of mine who used to tell me he was rationalizing not necessarily buying organic fruit. And he says, hey, don't tell me you don't stop at a burger stand someplace. Where do you think that stuff comes from? And I said, I pick and choose. And you're right. I do stop at a burger stand someplace, and I don't ask them if the meat's organic. It's not that easy to get it. And definitely there are the ways that you work your costs out, and it generally is expensive. But if we worked organically as a full-on system, I know we could get our costs down. My costs when I farm organically really aren't that much more expensive, and I can eat those costs as long as I'm not looking at a margin multiplier. As long as I don't need to make 30%. Because that's what the industry standard is, and I'm okay making 28%. I can make those things work. Yeah, we need to ask more questions about, like, why. I had a winemaker of the year from the Chronicle. Got winemaker of the year, who I was having an email with, and I used to be a buyer, and I used to support this person when this person was starting out early in their career. I bought the wine, and that person said to me, it's too much information. If I put all of this information on the label, they won't understand it. That's a cop-out. I don't care if you don't understand it. If you really are curious about what Velcorin is, go do a web search. That's what I do.
Yeah. Now, speaking of climate change, you mentioned it a few minutes ago. Last time you were on the show, we were in a drought. Now we're obviously not in a drought. How has that affected harvest?
All right. Was it 2017? Well, here I'll tell you that 2017.
2017
was the last it was the last significant year in terms of drought. We had, coming into harvest, Labor Day weekend, we had this intense heat spike. We had like 10 days of 106-degree weather or something like that, as I recall. I had a vineyard where what the vines will do is if it gets too hot, they'll go in. This is what's great about vines. Vines are so durable. They will protect themselves. Vines are like, if you've ever tried to kill a blackberry bush, it's virtually impossible. You can cut the tops off, you can do all kinds of things, and it's almost impossible to kill. And grapevines are very much the same way. They're resilient. There's a reason why they're all over the place. But what they'll do is they'll go into self-protection mode, because they'll be like, I can make babies again next year. I can make fruit again next year, because that's what the whole idea of fruit is, seeds, is to spread the vine. And I had these vines shut down because we had 10 days of this really high intense heat, and I was getting potential sugars of like 9 on a wine. Think about a wine that's 9% alcohol, or 10% alcohol, 11% alcohol. That's starting to push it. And I thought, when I get this fruit to the winery, all of my wine is going to taste sour and unpleasant. The fruit qualities are going to be unripe. It's going to taste green. I made some of the best wine I've ever made. If I could go back and make that wine again, I would be very, very successful, because I sold through it really, really quickly. I think what we're going to have to do is learn how to accept variability and learn how to say, okay, this is a moderate and long growing season, and I'm going to respond like this for the fruit to make a wine that is maybe more relatable to the season. And those are the things that I was talking about earlier. Like, we lose with industrialization, because industrialization is about how we supplement what nature doesn't have. No, I don't.
Mass produce it.
That's right. We stamp it out, of course. That's what making cars is like, right? It's like widgets. But that's kind of like with that. And climate change isn't consistent. It's inconsistent. The earth is spasming, and you can see it. You can go back and forth whether or not we're doomed. I don't really think, when I look at us as humans, I don't think that we're necessarily a part of the important equation of the earth being here. The earth was here, 200 million years ago. There weren't humans. There was like dinosaurs, right? And it was maybe not hospitable to us. And there were times when we had a lot of volcanic activity, and we wouldn't have been able to. We're part of a. It's funny. People come into the winery, and I tell them, I go through the whole spiel. I'm opening up barrels, and we're tasting wine. I'm making it fun, exciting, and everybody's like, "Wow, this is so cool! Oh yeah, that tastes good. That tastes good." And then I get there and I stop and I go, the whole thing, farming and winemaking, and I've seen repetitions, and I'm so much more comfortable with death. And then all of a sudden, it's like everybody just stops for a second. And like, I don't mean in a negative way. If you look at things and you look at life and you look at the transition between when you're in the amniotic sac, right? And then you become, if I told you the night before you were born that, aren't you excited? Tomorrow, you're going to be human and you're going to breathe air. You would say to me, breathe air? What is that? I'm totally comfortable here. I don't want to go out there, right? And I've had children. I've seen that transition. Same thing with death. It's a step in another direction. We just don't know what's on the other side. But if you bring in fruit and it's all sweet and pretty, and you turn it into wine, that shift is it's dramatic, it's violent. But then you end up with this beautiful wine on the other side. And then even if you take it to the carbon cycle, who hasn't had beautiful aged balsamic vinegar? And that's wine taken to that next level. Kind of. It's a little more complicated than that. But I'm simplifying it. So for anybody who calls BS on what I just said, it's not. But yeah, and it's like if you look at the spiral galaxies and you look at fiddlehead ferns, you see repetition. So why wouldn't there be other examples of whatever's going on here? So it's like a continuum. Yeah, I'm sorry. I can, because it's just cool. I'm excited about it.
But you know what? These are great conversations that even we've had at the wine bar.
Yeah.
I mean, just staying really late till closing, and some great conversations. And the one thing I really like too is the fact that you have no problem taking anyone that wants to know a little bit more about wine and taking them to the back and showing them how it's all made. Yeah, you definitely love it, and you definitely show it. But it's awesome. There's no additional tour fee or anything. I mean, It really feels like once you're there, like it's amazing. It really feels like you're at a local wine bar that really just wants to make the community happy.
Yeah, totally. And I take it as a great compliment. A couple of years, I had an intern who came in. I don't even want to call her an intern. I feel like there's something, I don't want to say like belittling, but there's something. So somebody came in, she said, hey, I'd love to come and learn and help and pitch in wherever I can. She came in, she was over the course of and we're friends, we'll be lifelong friends to this day. And when she left, she said, I think you changed my life. And then I had an intern the next year who came in. She was a college intern. She was with me for 3 months. She came from France. And I told her this, what I just told you at the end of the 3 months. I told her this story, but at the end of her stay, I didn't remind her, I didn't badger her with it. At the end, she goes, you know what, I think you changed my life. And I do that because my life becomes enriched. Like, it's like we share this together. We share these observations. Like, I'm always telling my kids, I'm like, look at these beautiful poppies. You see that intense orange, yellow color? Like, stop. You got to stop sometimes, and you got to look at the things that are happening. Pay attention to the beauty that's around you, because
that's honestly one of the negative things about the Bay Area is really just
too beautiful.
Well, I mean, if you take a moment to stop and appreciate the beauty, yeah, it's super beautiful, but everyone's so busy. Yeah. Everyone, you're in this mentality of just, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? Going to the next thing. And it's just nonstop hustle and bustle.
True, and I hope that the wine bar can be a place where people can maybe. I have an area in the wine bar where I have what I call provisions, and the idea is I want people to come in after work and get a bottle of wine for $15, and get stuff like dried pasta, tomato paste, some garlic, some onion, maybe some tinned fish, just some fruit, maybe just enough to make dinner for 2 people. $40. You're on your way home. Maybe you had a glass or a taste of wine while that happened, and so that you can kind of stop, recharge. You can stay if you want. I love that too, but you can also pick up stuff that we don't really have much of in that Richmond area. There's really nobody that's doing kind of specialty items. I mean, I come from that side of the business, so I go foraging for really cool stuff. I have this this avocado blossom honey that comes from Stepladder Creamery, it's an organic farm, and it was expensive. I bought 10 containers for $10 a piece, and I remember I had to spend $120 on it, and I was thinking, I'm going to spend $120 on honey that I'm going to try to resell for $15 a piece, and now when I'm almost sold out, and when people buy, they start looking at it, and I tell them about it, enthusiastic about how good it is. It's not just honey. It's this intense, beautiful honey that's floral and also kind of woody at the same time. And they want to take it, and I almost like, I don't really want to sell it to you. You know, people say, I don't have prices up. People are, is this stuff for sale? And I'm like, yeah, kind of. Also, kind of, that's, you know, those things are all really important to me. But yeah, and I want that to be able to happen. I want people to come in and feel really comfortable. Tomorrow night, we're doing a paella night. We're going to make some paella, and I'm going to start serving some wine that I bought that's not purity. There'll be purity wine as well. And I want to make it accessible. $20, you get a plate of paella, you get a glass of wine. And I hope people show up for that.
Yeah, sounds amazing. What's in your vision in the next few years?
I want to continue to work on I want to be able to, like I said, you know, earlier, as a business to hit that sustainability. And I think I'm there. I thought last year would do it, and that last year was close. And, you know, definitely, like the whole thing with Whole Foods, people will sometimes come at me and be like, oh, you're selling Whole Foods, you know, do you feel like, you know, you're selling to Amazon, or do you feel like you're selling out? And it's kind of like, Whole Foods came in to me, and I've been kind of developing a relationship with Whole Foods. I shop at Whole Foods. I shop at Monterey Market, where I've been selling my wine for years. We go to everything. I shop at Target. I shop at Safeway.
Okay, I do have to ask, how does it feel to walk through Whole Foods and see your wine there?
I love it. I mean, I shop there. I don't know. Honestly, I think maybe
There's got to be a cool factor, right?
to a degree it is, but I want a message to go out with my wine. And I'm working on a relationship with Whole Foods. Natural wine is growing. I don't go a week without reading at least a couple of articles on natural wine. And then there's you know, different camps. Some people just don't dig it. Some people love it. But it's on the if you're reading about and you like food and wine, you're hearing about it. I've had people at Monterey Market, which is in Berkeley, stop and say, hey, do you guys have any? Because they see me stocking up because I stock my own wines there. And they're like, hey, do you have any natural wine? You read about this. I don't think that. I personally feel like Whole Foods isn't there yet with natural wine, and they should be, because they started out as organic, as ecologically sensitive, and I want to be a part of that long game. But they were significant. They were like, they did enough business. They put a $30,000 purchase order in with me. And I was able to buy a bottling line that I was able to share with these other natural winemakers. And we're like, I don't have that. It cost us $10,000 to put that bottling line together. I don't have that kind of money. My wife has said, let's pay off some debt. And I said, hold on, we're hiring somebody from out of the winery to come and help us bottle, and we're going to waste more money long term on that. Now I've got this money. I'll go to the community. I'll go to the other members, and I'll say, we're all going to chip in, and we're all going to help pay for this. And when we pay for it, then we don't have to pay anymore. So we're all going to start saving money at that point. And that's kind of how that worked. So Whole Foods, and I want to continue to work with Whole Foods. I'm honored to be working with Whole Foods. I shop there. I've been shopping there pretty much all my life. Nobody's perfect, but I also want to be at the small little places. I'm at a place in San Francisco called Fig and Thistle. I sell my wines at Ordinaire, which is one of the coolest natural wine bars in the country. At Punchdown, another super, super, super cool wine bar. I want to be at all those places, and they all are parts of the pie, just like having somebody come in who says, I don't know anything about natural wine. Can I just get a glass of wine? And then I sit there and I say, well, taste this and taste this and taste this. And all of a sudden, they're telling me, man, I like the way that tastes like kombucha. Yeah. But it doesn't have to. Don't get me wrong. Not all my wines taste like, most of them don't actually. And the wines here that we're drinking don't. They're very, very far. They taste like wine.
Well, how many different wines do you have available right now?
Oh, shoot. That's my problem, is I make a bunch of different bottling. So right now I probably easily have 15 different wines. And if I have a conversation with you and we're talking, I'll run in the back and I'll illustrate a conversation with just like, hold on, I'll be right back. And I'll open up a bottle of wine. And I know, like, if it's my wine, I can use it, because we do this thing called topping up barrels, and you have evaporation in barrels, and typically you'll refill that with other wine to keep air out. But, so I can have fun like that. I can do those kinds of things. And then now I'm doing the Amaro, and I'm doing cider, and I'm going to do a cider wine mashup, and I can also sell beer. So I know a lot of times people, they they're like, oh, I don't really like wine. I want beer. And I'm working on having a beer selection. And I have ciders as well. And I have ciders from Tony Couturi, who's an old school natural winemaker, long family lineage up in Sonoma, a beautiful cider. And I've got this other Bass cider that tastes like pickle juice, but it's good too. So yeah, so I have a lot of options.
It's good stuff. So Noel, I want to thank you for coming on to the podcast. It's always a great time having you here, and I always learn a lot. I'm super happy to see how successful your business is growing. I mean, 2 years ago from when we did the first original podcast, which I think was in September. October?
Well, we had them on in our September, post in October.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, we're almost 2 years later, and it's amazing what you've done with the business. So, for the listeners and the viewers to follow you again, it's the study_wine bar.
The study_wine bar on Instagram. You can check Facebook. I've got my son working on that, so he's going to be working on that social. And then there's Purity Wine on Instagram, and that's where I talk about the wine. But the study is really where I want to see people, locals, following me, because I want to be able to have that interaction where that's how I can talk to you immediately. I'm working on Facebook. I'm not a Facebook person. My 12-year-old son, Jake, is doing that. Lucas is doing some other Instagram stuff for me. He's my younger son. And I want to push them to do a little bit more and figure out.
You're going to get older, middle school and high school friends following you.
Oh man, my wife and I, we talk about that with like high school, and she's like, "Oh, they're not gonna care about." I said, "Oh, we're gonna have to watch them when in high school." She's like, "Oh, they're not gonna care about wine, kids." I'm like, "No, it's the Amaro that they're gonna be because it's sweet and it's boozy." So I remember when I was 13.
I had my first glass of wine at 14.
Yeah, a friend and I we left school at lunch. It was like 13 or so, and we left school at lunch and we went to his house, and his parents had a liquor cabinet, and we hit that. And I think we were drinking tequila, and we went back to school, and I was just like, "Oh my God, I'm so lightheaded and so dizzy. I can't." Kids will do that. And I try, one of the things that I do try, and I always have done with my kids, is I make wine available. If they want to have a sip, a taste, it's nothing that's precious, and that in terms of like, I don't ever make them feel like, no, that's not for you. I want my kids to be comfortable with alcohol. And I think that's one of the ways to get them acclimatized. But, kids are going to be kids. When you're 17 and your dad's a winemaker, it's going to be like, your buddies are going to be like, what do you have we can get drunk on? It's been great. Marc, I love being here. This is really fun. You have I gotta subscribe. I have to apologize. I was just listening to you talk about your other podcasts. I'm like, why am I not? I mean, I have my own. I have like a ton of wine podcasts, but I gotta start listening. So I'm gonna put you on my subscription list.
Yeah, we have a few. We've got Keeping It Realty, Money Managers, and Marc Guzman podcast experience, and we're working on a couple of other projects too. So we've got a lot of stuff going on. And for listeners, you can subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and watch the video cast on Facebook and YouTube. So we're literally everywhere.
Perfect.
Yeah. So thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the wine.
Sam,
it's amazing.
Thank you, man. Yeah, tasty. I know. I'm happy with all of them. I don't know if
I am going to have
headspace.
another sip of the Syrah because that was amazing. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Thank you to our producer, Sam Lubman. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share the podcast. Remember, you can listen to the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, iHeartRadio, Google Play, SoundCloud, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. For more information on my business as a property manager and real estate team, go visit my website at marcguzman.com. I really want to thank all of you for listening. It means the world to me, and I hope today's episode provides you value in your day-to-day life. I created this podcast to help showcase the many great people that live in this world and help share some knowledge that I've learned along the way in life. Again, thank you for listening. Check out our sponsors, and I'll catch you on the next episode.